When my kids were little, I used to read to them from Alice in Wonderland. And I remember we learned that the Mad Hatter was mad because it represented hatters of the time, and that apparently the guys who made hats used mercury to turn the fur into felt, and they would breathe the mercury, and it would cause brain damage, and hence the Mad Hatter. And that was in the 70s and 80s that I had my young kids, and I, at the same time, was learning that we were supposed to avoid using aluminum pots and pans because there was apparently a connection to autism. So that was the first time for me that I made any connection between heavy metals and human health. And then a few years ago, I learned that there was an unnatural amount of aluminum in the soil, and that there was a program spraying aluminum and other heavy metals up into the atmosphere, and so I wanted to check it out. And that's the first way that chemtrails showed up for me. Basically, chemtrails is a geo-engineering program where airplanes fly at high altitudes and they spray chemicals into the atmosphere, including aluminum, barium, and strontium. And then those metals fall to the ground and they land in our bodies, on the soil, in our trees, in our food, and in our water. Many people confuse chemtrails with the normal jet contrails. The difference is that the normal jet contrails actually dissipate within minutes, while the heavy metals in the chemtrails cause those trails to persist for hours. And it's not a hypothetical thing. There are 32 states that already have legislation that's related to weather modification. The U.S. agencies that are documented to be involved in it include the U.S. Air Force, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, the U.S. Department of the Interior, the National Science Foundation, and I know China boasted about using cloud seeding and weather changing before the 2008 Olympics in order to keep the opening ceremony dry. So that this is happening is completely documented. It's just that you have to know where to look because it's not talked about on mainstream weather reports. And this is where it gets controversial. And it's kind of weird because even though it's factual that there are metals in the atmosphere and factual that those metals are falling to the ground, when you acknowledge that or question the legitimacy or the legality or the safety or the morality, it becomes controversial. And really, that's sad because if you're questioning something that has such major impact on us and on future generations and on our planet, it seems to me that it should be one of the most natural and encouraged parts of life and education.
Vini, Vidi, Vici. I came to see what a beautiful day it was. I saw what a beautiful day it was. And I'm conquering what a beautiful day it is because we have blue skies. Actual, earlier anyway, it was actual crystal clear blue skies. And I know in the news lately they've been projecting 3 90-degree plus temperatures Fahrenheit for the following weekend, for this weekend. It's I don't know, June 7th, June 8th. It's Monday. By Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, 90+ degree temperatures. Now, why is that significant? It really isn't, but for the fact that for the last 2 summers, at least, we've only had 1 or 2 90 degree days each of the last 2 summers. That is to say, 1 or 2 days the last 2 summers where it got to 90 or above, and that's it. And that was stretched throughout the course of the summer. Never mind 3 90-degree plus days in a row. Now, the reason I'm doing this recording is because I've noticed that since I got here out here in the open, I see what I'm always calling sprayers, and I'm obsessed with these sprayers, what I call the sprayers. You can look at my previous videos if you're so inclined. Eyes of glass, ears of tin, and the most recent would have been, you can see that I've been somewhat obsessed with these sprayers. What I call the sprayers. And really though, it's still up in the air, and most people think you're crazy if you even suggest that there's planes spraying aerosols laced with aluminum to put reflective materials into the upper atmosphere, thereby cooling temperatures at the surface, which I think they've been doing, and it got up to a pleasant 72 degrees today. Again, uncharacteristically cool, about 10 degrees cooler. I think that's probably due to the fact that they have been putting aluminum sulfides into the upper atmosphere, into the troposphere specifically, so that it can be raised by the warm air aloft. Warm air rises, so it carries these sulfates into the upper atmosphere, where they can stay there for a week to 2 weeks, managing solar radiation, and that's indeed what they've. NASA actually has a name for this non-existent program. They call it solar radiation management, and that's just what it does. It reflects sunlight back out into space. You'll see on spraying days these milky clouds that appear in the sky formed by contrails. Contrails that don't dissipate in a few seconds to maybe 40 seconds like a normal one, but they persist and they linger all day, becoming these artificially created clouds. That was the nature of my previous videos, because I have always loved sunlight. I like warm, I like sun. And when it looked for a couple of years there like I wasn't going to be getting it like I used to because of these milky, hazy sunshine days, and cooler than normal summers. The last couple of Independence Days, United States here, I'm in the United States, I've had to wear a jacket on my bicycle ride to watch the local fireworks display, and that just never happened. That's unheard of. And people say, oh, you don't understand weather. Yes, I do understand weather, and I also understand patterns, and the pattern has been cooling. And I think it's been because of these aerosols they've been spraying. And I don't want to get into that anymore, except to say I come out today to enjoy this perfectly blue sky day, and what do I see? What do I see once again? These planes are, I don't see the persistent lingering trails, but I do see the contrails becoming aerosols again. So, the upshot of this is, I'm not buying it. I'm thinking we're not going to see the 90-degree days 2 or 3 days from now. Okay, it's Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. 3 days from now, my guess is
climate engineering. Some people call it geo-engineering. The National Academy of Sciences really said engineering might not be a good term, or management might not be a good term. That implies a little bit of precision that probably isn't appropriate at this stage. So the National Academy of Sciences of the United States has offered climate intervention as a term we might be using. So we're trying to fix this problem. And so what does this mean for different activities? Well, we might have to interact with people who are geologists who understand the increased risk of, say, earthquakes, because if we're pushing fluids underground, what does that mean for civil society? So some people are looking for faster acting and cheaper options, and so people have done research on what's referred to as solar radiation or albedo modification, up high in the stratosphere. So people like David Keith and others who have been studying this point out something, that if you start this intervention, you can have a rapid decline in the temperature, and once you stop adding those tiny particles in the stratosphere, boom, you're right back up to the carbon dioxide that you have accumulating in the atmosphere, acidifying the oceans and other effects. It's a very rapid. So lots of times you're talking about maybe hundreds of years of doing this type of activity, and they last in the atmosphere about a couple years. So
My guess is 3 days from now, we're not going to be seeing the 90-degree days. It might get close to 90, but I don't think we're going to see a heat wave that they're predicting. If we do see it, then my hope is all of this was my imagination, and the spraying was all in my imagination, and the cool days was all selective memory, as friends accuse me of having selective memory. They can't possibly be spraying aerosols or anything else for that matter, to the way most people's way of thinking, that this can't be happening. And I think that it has been happening. And that when Hillary Clinton becomes president, it'll only continue. Because it's all about, yes, global warming is real, but we're still going to be pumping more CO2 into the atmosphere anyway, to hell with it. Meanwhile, without anyone's knowledge, we're going to be doing this albedo modification, hoping that we can keep it cool anyway.